Welcome to my channel. If you've enjoyed watching one or two of our videos and haven't subscribed yet, click that subscribe button now for more captivating stories like this. Don't miss a single story. The protagonist, Tim, woke up and found himself on the rooftop of a tall building. He had a pounding headache as if he had spent a long night in a nightclub. The strong smell of rotten meat accompanied him, and he couldn't immediately understand why he was on the roof instead of his bed. The stench permeated the air, and he could hear screams and moans coming from below the building. When he looked down, he was puzzled by the presence of a large crowd of people who seemed to be idle and making strange noises. Upon closer inspection, he realized that they were actually a horde of decaying zombies. Suddenly, without warning, he was thrown off the roof, leaving him frightened and bewildered. Just moments ago, he had been in the normal world, and now he was facing a dire situation. In his state of confusion, Tim reached for his phone to find out what was happening, only to discover that his pockets were empty. He had no money, no phone, and no keys to his apartment. All he had was a pack of peanuts that he had bought the day before. Tim felt a sense of despair, believing that he was about to meet his end. As he contemplated his fate, a nearby door opened, revealing a brave and resourceful survivor named Queenie. Queenie, who had been navigating this dangerous world for several days, exuded confidence. Her figure was accentuated by form-fitting attire, and Tim couldn't help but be captivated by her presence. From a distance, he observed her with a mix of uncertainty and fascination. As Tim struggled to decide how to approach the situation, he continued to watch Queenie. Queenie approached a barrel and pierced it with a knife, causing water to spray and cleanse her body. She slowly removed her latex top, allowing the water to flow over her ample breasts and wash away the dried blood and dirt from her legs and buttocks. Tim's attention was fixated on her, and he couldn't help but feel a surge of desire. In his distraction, he accidentally made a noise, catching Queenie's attention. Being attuned to the dangers of this world, she immediately sprang into action, without even having time to button up her clothes. With her pistol drawn, Queenie swiftly approached Tim, pressing the weapon against his forehead and warning him not to make any sudden moves. Tim pleaded for mercy, expressing his innocence and lack of ill intentions. Queenie, keeping the pistol trained on him, demanded to know who he was and why he was there. Caught off guard by Queenie's sudden appearance and her intimidating stance, Tim found his gaze inadvertently fixated on her feet. This further incensed Queenie, and she delivered a powerful blow to Tim's face. Frustration grew within her as she realized he was objectifying her instead of taking the situation seriously. However, before she could escalate the confrontation further, a massive zombie emerged from behind her, disrupting their interaction. Queenie swiftly evaded the approaching zombie, demonstrating her combat skills honed through survival in this perilous world. Tim, taken aback by the turn of events, was momentarily relieved from his impending doom and found himself mesmerized by Queenie's display of bravery. However, he couldn't shake off the fact that he had only moments to savor his final glimpse of beauty. The colossal zombie, hindered by its disproportionate body and broken leg, posed a threat to both Queenie and Tim. Sensing the imminent danger, Queenie resorted to using a bandsaw specifically designed to combat such gigantic zombies. With a single swing of the saw, she managed to sever the mutant's leg. The mutant's lack of agility caused it to stumble and fall to the ground after losing one leg. Queenie took advantage of this opportunity and swiftly jumped on top of the mutant, wrapping her arms around its neck with a bandsaw. In one swift motion, she severed the mutant's head, which landed on the ground. Tim was shocked by the sight and found it hard to believe that a small, seemingly fragile girl could defeat such a massive zombie. Queenie had successfully eliminated the core of the mutant, which proved to be of fairly good quality. Queenie dismounted the fallen zombie, but she was dissatisfied with one thing. She had just taken a shower and was now once again covered in rancid blood. She turned her attention to Tim, who was squatting with his back turned to her. She questioned why he was behaving cowardly and inquired about the camp he belonged to. Tim, still struggling to accept the reality of the situation, munched on his nuts, thinking that this must be a vivid dream. He believed he would eventually wake up in his bed. Queenie approached him and took the peanuts from him, as though taking them from a child. She examined the nuts with anticipation and asked where he had obtained such valuable longevity nuts. Tim explained that they were just the snacks he had bought at a regular supermarket. Growing tired of the frivolous conversation, Queenie pressed the bandsaw against Tim's neck and repeated her questions about his origins and the source of the rare food. The cold touch of the saw and the searing pain of the cut finally made Tim realize that it was all real. He introduced himself and clarified that the peanuts were not anything extraordinary. Suddenly, a bullet pierced Queenie's leg, causing them both to react in shock. Before they could fully comprehend the situation, a hail of bullets rained down on them, forcing them to seek cover behind a wall. Tim was terrified, as he had never experienced such a dangerous situation in real life. Queenie's leg was bleeding heavily, and Tim urged her to seek medical attention. Queenie realized that there were more zombies in the area for a reason. People had deliberately lured them there. A group of bandits on a nearby rooftop discussed their plan to have Queenie kill the zombies so they could profit from the easily obtainable adrenochrome. One of the bandits expressed concern about Queenie seeking revenge for the shot in her leg. The leader of the bandits revealed that the bullet contained cadaveric poison, indicating that Queenie's death was imminent. Meanwhile, Queenie's leg began to swell, indicating the severity of the cadaveric poison. She tearfully confided in Tim that she needed penicillin to neutralize the poison, as her evolved body was immune to normal infections but not to this potent toxin. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Queenie instructed Tim to find her sister and warn her to run away, as without Queenie's protection, the bandits from Camp 17 would pose a significant threat to her. If her sister escaped, at least she would have a chance. Tim contemplated finding penicillin to save Queenie, but she explained that it was highly unlikely, as it was one of the rarest substances in the world. Queenie used smoke bombs to create a diversion and ordered Tim to escape through the door she had entered, promising to hold off their attackers. She handed Tim a note with information about her sister's whereabouts, emphasizing the importance of their escape. Tim hurried toward the exit, but he couldn't shake off the feeling that leaving Queenie behind without repaying her for saving his life was unjust. He also yearned to return to his own world, where penicillin was readily available in any pharmacy. Suddenly, a voice in his head, part of a system he had unknowingly become connected to, asked if he truly desired to return to his world. Tim inquired if he could come back to this reality once he had obtained the penicillin. The system reassured him that he could return at any time. Determined to help Queenie, Tim resolved to return to the real world immediately. Tim woke up in a hospital bed, surrounded by the sounds of passers-by and traffic outside. The world was unchanged, and the foul smell was no longer present. He rushed out into the hospital corridor, shouting a single word, penicillin. Meanwhile, Queenie sat on the rooftop, consumed by the effects of the poison. Her only thoughts were for Tim to find her sister and warn her of the danger. The bandits, thinking Queenie was no longer a threat, prepared to reap the rewards of their scheme. Tim encountered a nurse in the corridors who warned him not to run. Ignoring her, he noticed the nurse carrying a tray of pills and swiftly gathered them under his t-shirt. Without paying attention to the nurse's protests, he continued running. In a desperate state, he pleaded with the program to transfer him to another world. Meanwhile, Queenie remained motionless on the roof, seemingly lifeless. Tim approached her and asked if she was still alive. Queenie turned to face him, but she was unhappy that he had returned, hoping that he had already warned her sister and left. Tim, trying to prevent her negative reaction, revealed a bottle of penicillin, claiming he had come to save her. Astonished, Queenie wondered where he had obtained it from. Tim urged her to ask fewer questions and reassured her that it was genuine penicillin, emphasizing that it was not their time to die. He proposed that they escape together, with their sanity and memories intact. Queenie hesitantly took the pill Tim offered, as she had no other choice. After a few minutes, Tim inquired about her well-being, and to her surprise, Queenie found her leg had returned to normal with no signs of infection. She marveled at the quick effect of the penicillin. However, their respite was interrupted when the door to the roof opened, revealing the bandits. Their leader ordered them to find Queenie and extract the core of the monster, suggesting they could have some fun if they were lucky and she was still warm. Unfazed, Queenie confronted the bandits with a bandsaw, challenging them to have fun with her. Astonished by her survival, the bandits quickly retreated. Meanwhile, Tim waited anxiously in the apartment, hearing the unsettling sounds of violence from above. He discovered a neatly placed notebook on the table in the corner. Tim started flipping through the pages. It was a personal diary, but he couldn't fathom who would write such a thing. The entry on July 21, 2008 mentioned a sunny day and a plump young woman from the house opposite who frequently appeared on the street. The author seemed to appreciate her figure. On July 22, there was a new manager at the author's workplace, and the author commented on her attractive physique. However, their interest in the woman from the house opposite seemed to wane as they found the new girl more enticing. The diary then took a dark turn as it mentioned rumors of a virus outbreak in a nearby city. The author expressed concern, hoping it wouldn't reach them. However, the girl they were infatuated with became infected, and the author witnessed her transformation firsthand. The virus started spreading rapidly, leading to the quarantine and closure of their company. The author was confined to their living space, with limited provisions and unanswered calls for help. They contemplated the possibility of starving to death. Eventually, they decided to venture out for food, only to discover a destroyed and abandoned city. The supermarket was chaotic, with people fighting over scarce resources. The author managed to secure some food and medicine but also witnessed infected individuals biting others. The television signal suddenly disappeared, and the last message conveyed that no outside help was coming. As days passed, the food supply dwindled, and the author lived in fear of the infected hordes outside. They resorted to surviving on water while reminiscing about the manager's attractive appearance. One day, they heard screams from a neighboring house and witnessed a gruesome act of violence. His own husband had killed their neighbor. Terrified, the author hid and avoided detection. Days later, someone knocked on their door, seeking penicillin in exchange for a large pile of food. The author agreed, highlighting the value of penicillin in this world. They also observed a man eating zombies, which perplexed them. However, their penicillin supply was later stolen, leaving them without hope. Determined to escape their confinement, the author decided to face the infected outside. Armed with a kitchen knife, they knew it was a life or death situation. Unfortunately, the diary abruptly ended, suggesting that the author did not survive their encounter with a zombie. The diary provided Tim with an understanding of the dire circumstances in this world, where the virus turned people into zombies. Food shortages were rampant, and penicillin held immense value. Fortunately, Tim had easy access to penicillin in his own world, which gave him an advantage. Tim suddenly felt the cold barrel of a gun pressed against his head. The leader of the bandits, whom he now understood as the boss, was behind him. It became clear to Tim how Queenie had managed to survive in such a dangerous world. In a matter of moments, Tim found himself on his knees, with the boss eyeing the jar of penicillin in his hands. The jar was full, and Tim couldn't believe what he was seeing. The boss realized that if he handed over the penicillin to his superiors, he would gain a significant promotion. However, Tim's luck was about to run out, as he sensed that he was on the brink of death. Desperate to save himself, he blurted out that he had more of something, hoping to buy some time. Just then, Queenie entered the apartment, interrupting the tense situation. The boss seized Tim as a hostage and warned Queenie that any further steps would cost Tim his life. In response, Queenie confidently stated that if the boss pulled the trigger, she wouldn't hesitate to retaliate. She demanded the immediate release of Tim, emphasizing that their survival depended on parting ways and avoiding the approaching hordes of zombies attracted by the sound of gunfire and the smell of fresh blood. The boss, known as Paul, realized the gravity of their situation. He also knew that meeting a group of zombies could be their last encounter. However, he was reluctant to let go of someone as valuable as Tim. As Paul contemplated his options, Queenie continued to insist on Tim's release, having already killed many of Paul's comrades. Paul finally pushed Tim toward Queenie and released a harpoon, catching onto a nearby building. He began climbing up using an automatic traction mechanism, promising that their next encounter would result in Queenie being torn apart and fed to the zombies. Meanwhile, Tim had regained his composure and pressed his face against Queenie's chest. Becoming more and more annoyed, Queenie asked how long Tim was going to stay in her breast. The city was engulfed in darkness, and hordes of zombies continued to roam aimlessly in the streets. Queenie peered out of the window and determined that they were at a safe enough distance from the walkers. After a brief rest, they would continue their journey. Queenie gazed into Tim's eyes, her blue eyes shining brightly, and expressed her desire to clarify a few things. She wanted to know who he was and how he managed to possess rare items like peanuts and penicillin, which had been scarce for a long time. Tim didn't immediately respond, realizing that he shouldn't reveal all his cards so quickly. He needed to find a way to evade the question. Sitting down at the table, he tossed a pack of penicillin to Queenie. She held it in her hands, feeling as though she was holding a precious piece of gold. Tim suggested that she could take the entire jar for herself as payment for saving him. Furthermore, if Queenie agreed to accompany and protect him, he would provide her with not only penicillin but also many other valuable items in this world. Queenie couldn't believe that Tim possessed something even more valuable than penicillin. Intrigued, she asked Tim about his intentions. He assured her that he wasn't aligned with any particular group and that she might consider him a privileged man who could turn her life into a paradise. However, Tim believed himself to be an unlucky worker from the 21st century rather than a spoiled individual. Queenie, though she thought Tim appeared spoiled, reluctantly admitted that he had saved her life with the penicillin. After some consideration, she agreed to protect him and follow him. However, she warned that if she ever detected a hint of deception, she would cut him into pieces and turn him into meatballs. Tim was pleased to have earned her trust in the company of a beautiful girl. He hoped that being with her would finally give him the opportunity for a genuine physical connection. Now that their agreement was in place, Tim decided to ask Queenie about the state of the world. Like a knowledgeable teacher, Queenie began to provide a brief overview of the apocalypse. The world had been devastated by a virus that turned people into zombies, with an infection rate of approximately 80%. The global population had plummeted from 9 billion to just a single survivor. Those who remained had become the walking dead. Queenie explained that the zombie core possessed both herbal and mineral properties. When ingested directly, it provided a short burst of energy. However, if one prepared an evolution potion, it could have various effects on the body, enabling evolution under different circumstances. Evolution potions are categorized into 3 levels. The first level allows for a 20% evolution, the second level enables a 30% evolution, and the third level grants a 35% evolution. These potions can be used individually or combined to increase the chances of evolving. Due to the rapid adaptation of the virus, powerful antibiotics like penicillin quickly lost their effectiveness. However, penicillin remained a highly valuable medicine for saving lives, as it had the ability to swiftly destroy the infection. The microorganisms that synthesized penicillin also underwent mutations, making it even more valuable. As the virus began to spread and humanity realized the futility of trying to defeat it, people started forming groups for survival. Currently, there are 3 organizations operating in the city: Camp 17, Earth Construction, and Ascending Together. The group encountered earlier belonged to Camp 17, known for their ruthless behavior. They openly engage in burning, killing, and robbing anyone in their path, driven by various desires, including the exploitation of women. Their boss takes pleasure in killing and even feeds on human flesh. After Queenie shared this information, she looked out onto the street and noticed a large accumulation of zombies. Since Tim was unable to contribute much in their current situation, Queenie suggested finding a place to stay for the night and resuming their journey at dawn. Tim sat on the bed, while Queenie took a seat on the sofa, telling him to get some rest as he wasn't of much use. As Tim observed Queenie's face, he found it hard to imagine that she possessed such combativeness. He expressed his desire to return to the 21st century, and the system began the transfer process. Tim opened his eyes slightly, feeling a slight weight on him. When he fully opened his eyes, he saw a well-endowed girl in front of him, asking if he was awake in a sweet and gentle voice. Startled, Tim quickly got out of bed and pushed the girl away, realizing she was his mistress. He questioned why she had come to him, and she explained that he had been hit by a car, but the doctor assured her he would be fine. Luckily, she had made an emergency contact, allowing the hospital to identify someone to cover his expenses. Tim was puzzled by how she managed all of this, but she disregarded his question and asked what he would like to eat. Feeling embarrassed by the amount of care being shown to him, Tim hesitated. The girl playfully laughed, admitting that she was embarrassed by his embarrassment. She got out of bed, stating that she would go buy everything he needed. Tim recognized this as an opportunity to acquire items he could take to the parallel world, so he agreed. While alone, he pondered the system and discovered that accessing it would display a menu on his hand, consisting of 3 icons: memory, carry, and charge. He wondered how to charge it and how much charge remained. Within 10 minutes, the girl returned with 2 large bags, visibly out of breath from their weight. Tim hurriedly got out of bed, intending to help, but she insisted he shouldn't exert himself and simply needed to rest. The girl introduced herself as Alexa, revealing her wealth and constant attention toward Tim. Despite this, he felt unworthy due to his lack of money and didn't reciprocate her feelings. Suddenly, the room's door swung open, revealing Alexa's angry uncle. Alexa confronted him, refusing to go to dinner with him and stating she had her own plans. Ignoring her, the uncle pushed her out of the room, following a direct order from her father. He closed the door behind him, leaving Alexa waiting downstairs. He then approached Tim's bed, gazing directly at him. Tim inquired about the problem, and the uncle mentioned that the problem should have resolved itself. He hinted that the money they offered Tim wasn't sufficient. In response, Tim asked what would happen if he became rich. The uncle pondered for a moment and shared a saying that a person with little stature always has big ambitions. However, he believed he knew enough about Tim to be certain that he would never reach the top in his lifetime. Tim saw this as a challenge and disagreed with the uncle, interpreting his words as an invitation to take action. In the parallel world, the sun had already begun to shine, and Queenie actively tried to wake Tim up. Tim woke up, letting out a yawn, while Queenie glanced out the window and estimated that the journey to their base would take approximately an hour. The streets were swarming with hordes of zombies, and Queenie fearlessly navigated the steep roof of the former shops. Tim, filled with horror, clung to the wall as he followed her. After an hour of traveling, they stopped at the edge of a roof, where Queenie tossed a pebble at a nearby building. To their surprise, a suspension bridge descended from the building, which they used to enter the base. Tim commented on how well hidden the base was, as he would never have suspected anything was there. Queenie confidently led the way through the base's corridors, and Tim silently trailed behind her. They entered a room where a girl, Princess, lay completely bandaged. It was evident that she had been bitten and the infection had started to consume her body. Queenie happily administered a penicillin tablet to Princess, assuring her that she would recover soon. Tim inquired about what happened to Princess and why she appeared so unwell. Queenie explained that Princess had been wounded by zombies during a raid to obtain a mutant zombie core, which she intended to exchange for penicillin. Unfortunately, Princess was ambushed. Princess, unaware of Tim's presence, expressed her gratitude to him for saving her. Although Tim felt slightly uneasy about how easily he obtained the medications, he marveled at how two seemingly fragile girls could survive in such a harsh world. Queenie prepared food for Tim and handed him a plate. Grateful for the nourishment after a long day on their feet, Tim eagerly started eating but quickly spat out the entire contents into the trash can. Queenie, surprised, asked if he didn't like the food. Tim found it nearly repulsive and asked if they always ate such tasteless meals. Queenie explained that it was difficult to find quality food and mentioned that she mostly caught it from the river. Tim searched through his pockets and asked Queenie to open her mouth. He placed a piece of toffee in her mouth, which she found amazingly delicious. Tim then gave her another piece of candy, which she eagerly accepted. However, this time, he made sure not to let her chew on his fingers. Queenie asked if he could get more of the sweets, but Tim carefully avoided putting any more candy in her mouth. Instead, he placed everything he had on the table. Queenie handed a piece of toffee to her sister and watched as she placed it in her mouth. Princess expressed how delicious it was and inquired about its identity. Queenie responded, stating that it was the toffee her brother had just given her. As Princess savored the sweetness of the toffee, she pondered how wonderful it was to be alive. Queenie, delighted by her sister's enjoyment, advised her to savor it slowly, while Tim empathized with her. Tim retrieved additional food and chocolates from his system storage and placed them on the table. Queenie couldn't believe her eyes, these were delicacies she had only read about in books. She asked if all of it was for just the two of them. Tim assured her that they didn't need to worry because he still had plenty. In return, Queenie reached into a bag and handed it to Tim. She explained that the bag contained all the cores she had managed to collect, and now they belonged to him. As she handed him the cores, a burning sensation emanated from the seal on her left hand, suggesting a connection between the cores and the seal. Tim accepted the bag of cores but questioned if she was certain about giving them all away at once, considering their significant value. The penicillin he provided had saved their lives, and such food would usually cost much more. Queenie assured him that she would collect more cores in the future to repay the debt entirely. Tim took the bag of cores and then asked if there was a toilet available. Queenie informed Tim that the toilet was just around the corner, and he proceeded to enter. To his surprise, the toilet turned out to be a deep hole in the floor. Though it was an unpleasant sight, Tim knew he had no other choice and began executing his plan while he was alone. He wanted to study how the cores interacted with his body and the program within him. Taking one core in his hand, he observed as it was absorbed and disappeared within seconds. A voice in his head informed him that his charge had been replenished, and his transfer possibilities increased by 2, bringing the total to 3. Realizing the need to recharge further, Tim continued the process repeatedly, causing more cores to spill out of the bag into the toilet. Eventually, he reached a charge of 9 transfer possibilities and decided it was sufficient for now. However, he noticed that some cores were missing. Upon closer inspection, he realized they had fallen into the toilet, emitting a terrible stench. Disturbed by the sight, Tim exited the toilet, appearing visibly upset and pale. Queenie immediately inquired about what happened, and Tim simply attributed it to digestive problems. Unaware of his hidden supplies in the system storage, Queenie insisted that Tim eat the porridge she had prepared to regain his strength. Puzzled by the repetition of the same food, Tim questioned why they couldn't enjoy the delicious food he had provided earlier. Queenie explained that they couldn't afford to consume such valuable food daily, especially considering her efforts to procure ingredients from the river. Tim interrupted her and assured her that he had more supplies and could bring additional food if needed. Queenie eagerly consumed her porridge and expressed her appreciation, unaware that Tim had more provisions hidden away. Tim pondered the limited duration their supplies would last for the 3 of them and came up with a story. He claimed to be a trader who regularly received supplies for trading, ensuring a steady food supply. Expressing his enthusiasm, Tim eagerly stated his plan to gather food supplies the following day, emphasizing that he would personally obtain them to increase their food stock. As the next day arrived and they found themselves in their concealed hideout, the time came for Tim to depart. However, Queenie intervened and requested him to wait momentarily. Queenie handed him a small revolver, questioning its size. He assured her that its suitability for discreet killings was the most important factor. Grateful for the weapon, he promised to return soon with more goods. As Tim left, Princess, who had recovered thanks to the pills he brought, stood up from the bed. Observing Tim's behavior and appearance, she suspected he was not a local and knew little about their world. She also noted his generosity towards them but remained cautious, believing it was too early to trust him completely. Meanwhile, Tim traversed the city's buildings, carefully assessing his surroundings and ensuring he wasn't being followed. He reached a room where he felt safe enough to proceed with his plan. Suddenly, he woke up in a hospital, realizing it was time to be discharged to avoid further financial strain. His savings were depleting rapidly, and finding a job had proven challenging. Despite initially believing he could become wealthy, he now recognized his impoverished state. However, he needed to acquire valuable food and medicine for the other world, even though he lacked a physical body. Tim placed a variety of groceries on the checkout counter, intending to pay despite his limited funds. As he returned home with his packages, he realized there was still space in the system storage and decided to gather more supplies, including a change of clothes. Regretfully, he thought about the toilet incident, realizing he should have been more cautious to avoid spilling the cores. Meanwhile, Queenie strained to locate Tim's whereabouts from the rooftop, feeling frustrated by her surveillance skills. She hoped to observe his destination but found it perplexing that he seemed to vanish. Back at the edge of the roof, Tim encountered a horde of zombies, making it impossible to proceed. Wires dangled in front of him, offering a potential path to the next building. Despite the risk, Tim contemplated whether to retreat or find a way to overcome the pursuing zombies. One of the zombies forcefully pushed him off the roof, causing him to plummet rapidly, and food scattered in the vicinity. However, in the nick of time, Tim swiftly grabbed onto the wires, causing the zombies to fall instead. Despite the chaotic situation, Tim began requesting transportation to the real world, yet the program informed him that the passive climbing ability was currently in use, with room for improvement. Struggling to hold on, Tim was told he possessed 7 skill points, with the cost of improvement being 1 skill point and an upgrade costing 2 points. Ignoring the program, Tim shouted twice to enhance the passive climbing ability by 2 levels, expending 3 skill points. This enhancement allowed him to hold onto the wire with just one hand, a remarkable feat. Marveling at this newfound ability, Tim could now walk on a wire with ease, resembling a real-life Spider-Man. As he crawled along the wire, parodying Spider-Man, Queenie observed quietly. She initially perceived Tim as an ordinary person, but now she realized he was more intelligent than he seemed. Princess's assessment of him being more complex than meets the eye was proving accurate. Finally, Tim leapt onto the roof of another building, which was swarming with zombies. Determined to find an alternative route to the base, he decided to ascend even higher. Surveying his surroundings, Tim contemplated trying out other skills within the system. On one of the floors, he paused to look out the window, only to discover a multitude of office zombies outside. Confident that the glass acted as a barrier, Tim observed them closely. However, to his surprise, the office zombies, driven by their weight, cracked the glass, causing it to break. In a precarious situation, Tim fell but managed to grab the edge of the floor. Fending off the zombies with his newfound strength, Tim's arms became formidable, capable of effortlessly decapitating zombies with a single blow. Yet, realizing the futility of facing such a large crowd, he needed to escape quickly to avoid being bitten. While he showcased his skills, Tim noticed a peculiar change: he could move more freely. Unfortunately, his backpack, containing essential items and food, fell during the chaos, prompting Tim's distress. Climbing back to the window, Tim lured the zombies away with his hand, allowing him to retrieve his backpack. Frustrated by the loss of valuable possessions, Tim felt the weight of his hard-earned fortune slipping away. Determined to recover what was lost, he faced the challenge strategically. However, an unexpected threat emerged: a mutant zombie with extraordinary speed and agility. Tim, realizing the imminent danger, ran for his life, but the mutant swiftly closed in. Recognizing the urgency, Tim decided to expend all his remaining skill points on improvements. Enhancing climbing speed to level 6 and acquiring special skills like courage, discretion, and a firm step, Tim narrowly dodged the mutant's attacks. Despite the intense situation, he managed to use his enhanced abilities to evade the mutant's onslaught. The mutant continued to chase Tim, who had exhausted all his points, resulting in an equalized speed between them. Despite this, Tim couldn't outrun the mutant for long, as his strength was rapidly depleting. Any slowdown could lead to the mutant catching up and biting him. Faced with this perilous situation, Tim devised a plan. Abruptly stopping, he enticed the mutant, allowing it to believe it could finally feast on fresh flesh. Seizing the opportunity, Tim grabbed a piece of stick and pointed it at the flying mutant. The stick, propelled by the mutant's tremendous speed, pierced its body, causing it to scream in pain. Tim, using the stick like a knife, skillfully navigated through the soft skull of the mutant, eventually finding its core. Gleaming in his hands, this was Tim's first well-deserved core. Exhausted but gratified, Tim left the building moments later, with a backpack on his shoulder, while Queenie observed from the roof, amazed at his successful escape from the zombie-infested building. Tim, now at a similar level of strength as Queenie, followed her example and threw a pebble to open the entrance to their shelter. Princess greeted him at the threshold, having undergone a significant transformation since their last encounter. She appeared as a young girl in short shorts and a form-fitting t-shirt that highlighted her ample breasts. Initially unrecognizable due to previous bandages, Princess winked at Tim and introduced herself, wondering if he truly didn't recognize her. Princess, dressed more casually, pressed against Tim, asking about any blood on his clothes or injuries. She then playfully examined him, leaving Tim slightly confused. Princess's breasts pressed against him, and she rubbed herself against his body, expressing a desire to examine him thoroughly. This unexpected closeness left Tim contemplating whether his dreams were beginning to materialize in this world. Princess assured Tim that he was fine, devoid of any bites, and suggested they wash together, citing the scarcity of water sources. While warm water flowed over Princess's naked body, she lured Tim to join her, a prospect he found both surprising and thrilling. A virgin and unaccustomed to such situations, Tim hesitated but ultimately joined Princess. However, before they could proceed, Queenie intervened, grabbing Tim by the hair from behind, expressing displeasure with his behavior. Queenie questioned his actions, pulling his head toward her, while Tim explained his poor vision since childhood. They left the bath, and Tim swiftly changed the topic, shifting the conversation towards the provisions he had brought from the real world for a balanced diet. Among the items was fruit, including bananas, which Tim unwrapped for Queenie, inviting her to enjoy it without reservation. As Tim pushed the banana into Queenie's mouth, she licked it actively with her tongue, savoring its taste. The banana, now moist, was polished with her tongue as Tim continued to feed it to her. Eventually, a piece broke off in Queenie's mouth, leaving her delighted by its sweet flavor. Tim replayed the moment in his head multiple times, his eyes closed as he tried to relive the experience. A few minutes later, Princess emerged from the shower and was taken aback by the multitude of products around her. She wondered if she was dreaming, considering the extravagance. Tim contemplated giving everything to them, despite the high cost. He acknowledged the value of these items in their world and promised to be generous if they protected him. Queenie finally swallowed a piece of banana and understood the weight of her promise. Tim explained that with his savings, he could stock up once and find a way to exchange the rare metals, such as gold and silver. Queenie looked around and retrieved several yellow bars from under the table, resembling gold. They sparkled brilliantly, captivating Tim. Queenie assured him that he could take everything since they had no use for it. As darkness enveloped the surroundings, Tim reveled in his newfound wealth, feeling incredibly rich. Unbeknownst to him, someone entered his room while he slept, but his dreams were solely focused on how he would spend his riches. Suddenly, Princess stood before him, raising a knife with the intention of ending his dreams permanently. Queenie intervened and questioned Princess's actions. Princess explained that by killing Tim, they would inherit all his precious belongings. Queenie emphasized that Tim had saved them, providing them with penicillin for free, preventing them from meeting the same fate as others in their camp. Princess reminded Queenie of a past betrayal and the dire consequences it had brought. Queenie defended Tim, claiming he was not a traitor. Just as their conversation escalated, Tim himself interrupted and inquired about their whispered conversation. Without hesitation, Princess jumped into his bed, expressing her desire to sleep with him. Unaware of her intentions, Tim welcomed her, while Queenie sought to protect him from harm and also requested to sleep beside him. Astonished by his luck, Tim expressed his gratitude for having two attractive young women sleep with him, simply because he provided them with food. Princess, however, harbored secret intentions and concealed a sickle under the blanket. Her plan was to swiftly end Tim's life, but Queenie intervened, kicking the sickle out of Princess's hands. Startled awake, Tim questioned Queenie's actions as she sat on top of him. She explained that her intention was to ensure his safety through close proximity. Tim agreed, emphasizing the importance of safety. The night passed without incident, and Princess sat beside Tim, inquiring about his evolution. Tim, unable to disclose the true nature of his abilities, merely stated that he was an ordinary individual who had not undergone any significant changes. Curious about how he managed to climb the skyscraper, Tim was surprised by Princess's knowledge. She claimed to have a keen sense of smell and inferred his feat. Tim, unable to reveal the program, concocted a story, mentioning that he had gotten lost but survived thanks to the revolver Queenie had given him, implying his skill as a marksman. Queenie suggested that he give shooting at the range a try. Tim attempted to shoot, but his aim was clumsy, and he missed the target multiple times. Queenie questioned his accuracy and wondered why he was shooting so poorly, noting that he was even holding the weapon incorrectly. Queenie approached him from behind, took his hand, and offered to teach him the correct way to shoot. She explained that he needed to relax his shoulder and stand calmly before aiming and taking the shot. Finally, Tim was able to hit the target, and the program indicated that there was room for improvement in his ranged weapon proficiency. Tim realized that there were other skills in the system, but he had no points left to improve them. He mentioned the possibility of buying mutant cores to enhance his abilities, and Queenie informed him of a place where he could exchange valuables for cores, located about 2 kilometers away. Tim was pleased to hear this and asked her to take him there. After a few hours of traveling through the city, they arrived at their destination. Queenie knocked on the entrance of a fenced area, and they were immediately allowed in. They encountered a man named One-Eyed Alex, who was a local merchant with a wide variety of goods. However, his prices were high. As soon as Alex saw them, he pointed his gun at them, not recognizing Queenie and seeing an unfamiliar Tim. Queenie asked him if he was truly afraid of zombies, to which Alex replied that he was more afraid of living people. Tim got straight to the point and asked if Alex could sell him mutant cores. Alex inquired about what he would get in exchange, and Tim placed 3 cans of preserves on the table. Alex couldn't believe his eyes, as these were rare canned goods from the early 21st century. Just as Alex was about to take them, Tim intercepted the cans and insisted that he first be shown the cores. Alex, skeptical but intrigued, took a drag of his cigarette and warned Tim that he couldn't be easily fooled. Tim acknowledged Alex's astuteness and mentioned that one should always be cautious of people, not just zombies. Alex instructed them to wait while he gathered everything they needed. After a few minutes, he placed a bag of cores on the table, stating that those were all the cores he had, 11 in total. Alex proposed a trade, offering 2 cores for 1 can of expired meat, but since Tim had high-quality meat, he agreed to give 4 cores for 1 can, totaling 12 cores. However, Tim only needed 11, so he suggested making the deal and not worrying about returning the extra core later. Tim also offered Alex an additional jar of stew as a commission, requesting that Alex spread the word among his contacts to search for gold. In return, he would provide them with stew. Alex found the trading plan quite profitable and questioned why he needed gold. Tim assured him not to worry and emphasized that the more gold, the better. Finally, Tim was able to replenish his charge and received 24 skill points. He immediately used 4 points to improve his ranged weapon ability, leaving him with 9 points. Additionally, he gained a new ability called Fatal Bullet. Eager to test his newly acquired skill, Tim confidently shot at the target, hitting it accurately with each shot. Impressed, Tim asked the program to explain the Fatal Bullet ability. The program responded that the skill could be used once a day for free, but Tim had to utter the phrase, Fatal Bullet, before using it. Perplexed by the requirement, Tim questioned the program's reasoning, but it explained that it was a traditional practice for people to name techniques before performing them. Tim looked around to ensure no one was watching, feeling like a true marksman. Tim began performing the technique, standing in a stance with his gun raised. He loudly shouted the words, Fatal Bullet, and immediately fired a shot. Both sisters watched as Tim executed his pirouettes, but they didn't quite understand what kind of training he had undergone. Tim looked into the distance as the bullet hit a nearby building. He stared at the spot where the bullet hit for several minutes, but nothing out of the ordinary happened, leaving him puzzled. Entering the shelter, Tim realized that he needed to study his skills better. He noticed the girls tidying up and clearing the room for him. Queenie was carrying 4 huge boxes herself, but Tim offered to help, though Queenie declined, stating that the weight was not a problem for evolved individuals like them. Intrigued by their strength, Tim asked if all evolved people were incredibly strong. Queenie explained that while they were stronger than ordinary survivors, those who had evolved were still a minority. Excited by the idea of evolving, Tim asked Queenie how one could become evolved. After a moment of thought, Queenie outlined 3 methods. The first was surviving an infection that entered the blood after a bite, but such cases were rare now. The second method involved swallowing a core, which had a 10% chance of resulting in evolution if the person wasn't torn apart. The third method required evolution potions, which were rumored to be available in large organizations. Tim was thrilled at the prospect and mentioned his willingness to exchange food for such potions. Queenie suggested going to the mainland's unified buildings, where they could potentially find the potions they sought. Tim agreed wholeheartedly, and they decided to set out the following day. As they prepared to leave, Tim questioned why Princess wasn't joining them. Queenie reassured him, explaining that Princess's seemingly strange looks were due to her poor vision. They walked through the streets, encountering an increasing number of zombies near the base. Queenie mentioned the need to clear the area of zombies at some point. Meanwhile, Princess vented her frustration by shooting at a target, harboring anger towards Queenie for not allowing her to harm Tim. Suddenly, a neighboring building collapsed, surprising Princess.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more content. Feel free to leave a comment down below sharing your thoughts or suggestions. If you want to stay updated on all our latest uploads, click the notification bell icon. And hey, why not check out some of our other videos popping up on the screen right now? If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really means a lot. Peace.